floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, I thank you for convening this emergency open meeting. I thank Secretary General Guterres for his statement and support his call for an end to the fighting and the return to diplomatic negotiations. I thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. As the Israel-Iran military conflict enters its 8th day, it is distressing to note that it has resulted in a large number of civilian casualties and damage to facilities on both sides. If the conflict escalates further, not only will both sides suffer greater losses, but the regional countries will also be severely affected. Israel's actions violate international law and the norms of international relations, jeopardize sovereignty and security of Iran, and undermine regional peace and stability. China unequivocally condemns this. Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward a 4-point proposal regarding the current situation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has spoken separately with his counterparts of Iran, Israel, and the regional countries. At this critical juncture, the international community should further forge a consensus and make every effort to promote talks to ease tension. I will make 4 points. First, there must be an immediate ceasefire and an end to fighting. The use of force is not the right way to resolve international disputes. It will only exacerbate hatred and conflicts. The sooner a ceasefire is put in place, the less damage will be done. The situation in the region cannot be allowed to slide into an unknown abyss. The parties to the conflict, Israel in particular, should cease fire as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating and to avoid any spillover of the war. Second, the safety of civilians must be ensured. The red line of protecting civilians in armed conflicts must not be crossed at any time, and the indiscriminate use of force is unacceptable. The parties to the conflict must strictly abide by international law, resolutely avoid harming innocent civilians, refrain from attacking civilian facilities, and facilitate the evacuation of third country nationals. Third, we must stay committed to dialogue and negotiation. Communication and dialogue are the right paths to lasting peace. The current conflict has interrupted the negotiation process on the Iranian nuclear issue. The attacks on multiple Iranian nuclear facilities set a dangerous precedent and could have catastrophic consequences. We must not waver in the general direction of a political settlement to the Iranian nuclear issue, and we must persist in returning the Iranian nuclear issue to the track of a political solution through dialogue and negotiation. China welcomes the talk in Geneva among foreign ministers of UK, France, Germany, and the High Representative of EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and the Foreign Minister of Iran. Fourth, we must bring together the efforts of the international community to promote peace. Without stability in the Middle East, peace in the world would be elusive. The Israel-Iran conflict has led to a sudden escalation of tension in the Middle East and has also had a serious impact on global security. Recently, 21 Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint statement of foreign ministers calling for a ceasefire, resuming talks on the Iranian nuclear issue, and maintaining lasting peace in the region, which China fully supports. The international community, especially major countries with special influence on the parties to the conflict, should make efforts to cool down the situation rather than the opposite. The Security Council, as the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, should play a greater role in this regard. We support the Council in taking necessary actions in a timely fashion. China stands ready to continue to strengthen communication and coordination with all relevant parties, build synergies, uphold justice, and play a constructive role in restoring peace in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, We are grateful to the Guianan presidency for the prompt response to the request from Russia, China, Pakistan, and Algeria to convene this meeting. We thank the UN Secretary General for his opening remarks, as well as the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Director of the IAEA for their briefings. Madam President, exactly a week has elapsed since the start of the escalation of the Iran-Israeli conflict, which the Security Council discussed on the 13th of June. In this time, the world has been flooded with images depicting the night skies over Tel Aviv and Tehran and other cities lit up with explosions of tens and hundreds of rockets. The apocalyptic predictions have become a reality. People in both countries have been forced to take shelter in hideouts with each passing day. The list of civilian casualties on both sides lengthens. As a result of the closure of the airspace in the region, many third country civilians have become entrapped and they are striving to find a way home. The Iranian peaceful civilian nuclear facilities continue to be targeted, and this is liable to plunge us into a hitherto unseen nuclear catastrophe. The UN Security Council, the principal body for the maintenance of international peace and security, cannot shirk its responsibility and must provide an objective assessment of the situation and to devise an appropriate solution or decision. We cannot deny the obvious facts. It is indeed Israel which attacked Iran on the eve of the latest planned round of indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. Thereby, West Jerusalem not only demonstrated blatant disregard for the efforts that have been undertaken to seek a diplomatic solution to issues around the Iranian nuclear program, but also demonstrated contempt for its key ally, the United States, which up until recently had been declaring an intent to reach a compromise solution on this matter. It is worth recalling that the Iranian nuclear program is not a scroll secured by 7 seals, indiscernible to the international community. The nuclear facilities and installations in this country are under the safeguards of the IAEA and are continuously subject to scrupulous verification by agency inspectors. Not a single of the member states of this body is under more stringent oversight and scrutiny. Iran has been strictly complying with its obligations under the NPT and the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. The Secretariat of the agency's reports have no mention whatsoever about the presence of proliferation risks. So it turns out that Israel has disregarded the assessments of the Specialized International Agency, having on its own authority appointed itself a judge, single-handedly deciding to carry out strikes against a sovereign country with no regard for the UN Charter and international law. Just recently, in the Middle East, a tragic precedent occurred of an invasion into a state under the pretext of alleged presence there of WMDs, which subsequently failed to materialize. It's a pity that the United States, which demonstrated to the entire world this discredited example in 2003, which generated suffering for millions of people, does not wish to learn from its own mistakes. Today, the U.S., yet again, together with the U.K., France, and Germany, is attempting to persuade all parties to believe the groundless fabrications about plans allegedly harbored by Tehran to gain possession of nuclear weapons. Nor can we forget the fact that the attack on Iran was carried out at the time when the entire world observed with horror the ongoing man-made disaster which was unfolding in Gaza and continues to unfold in Gaza, and was condemned the ongoing humanitarian blockade of the Strip and was awaiting the high-level conference in support of the two-state formula under the aegis of the United Nations in accordance with General Assembly resolutions. Instead of reverting back to the sole possible negotiated peaceful settlement in Palestine, Israeli military political leadership raised the stakes and expanded the geography of the conflict in the region. Perhaps the Western Jerusalem's calculations also are to have the new military misadventure detract the international community's attention away from the crimes perpetrated by Tzahal in Gaza and the West Bank. We have seen highly perilous attempts to drag third countries into this confrontation, and this, as was rightly noted by the Secretary General, would have colossal consequences, not just for the stakeholders and the parties engaged, but for the entire region and international peace and security as a whole. We concur with Mr. Guterres' position about the need to avoid internationalization of the conflict. Madam President, the present escalation around Iran did not start yesterday. Having attacked the country, Israel first received a direct pass from a host of Western states. The rhetoric uttered by British, French, and German diplomats in the lofty chambers of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors are equally dangerous, just as dangerous as the deadliest weaponry, the blatant blackmail of the leadership of the agency in order to compel it to draft a vague so-called comprehensive assessment on the Iranian nuclear program, pushing through biased anti-Iranian resolutions at the IAEA Board of Governors. All of this made those countries effectively complicit in the Israeli aggression. Let's recall that this specific IAEA report was one of the justifications used by Israeli leadership for the attack on Iraq. What is telling in this connection is a cynical statement from the German Chancellor, Mr. Merz, about, and I quote, Israel doing the dirty work for us. End of quote. The fact that the launch buttons are being pressed by West Jerusalem does not absolve Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin from responsibility for what is taking place. Russia views the ongoing intense Israeli attacks targeting civilian objects in Iran as completely unacceptable and unlawful under international law. As a result of these reckless actions, unacceptable threats are being posed to international peace and security. Nuclear facilities cannot be targeted by strikes. We demand that West Jerusalem immediately cease attacks and raids on Iran, first and foremost the nuclear facilities which are under the protection of the IAEA. We expect that the agency leadership will draft in short order a detailed written report and response to the reports for consideration of the IAEA Board of Governors and the Security Council with a frank assessments of the damage sustained by Iran's nuclear and energy facilities, as well as the safeguards application in that country, including in the context of the presence of inspectors there, inspectors whose lives were under imminent threat. We take note of the clear Iranian statements about its steadfast commitment to obligations under the NPT and the willingness to resume contact with Washington to forge possible solutions that dispel all baseless suspicions and biases vis-a-vis Tehran's nuclear program under the condition that Israeli attacks cease. We support this position. We share the Secretary General's call for an immediate de-escalation resulting in a ceasefire. We firmly believe that a resolution can be provided for in a sustainable way only through diplomacy and negotiations. The goals of nuclear nonproliferation, whose cornerstone is the NPT, cannot and must not be attained through aggression at the cost of innocent lives. We believe that solutions whereby Iran's right to peaceful nuclear activity and Israel's unconditional safety and security will simultaneously be upheld are feasible and attainable. We have conveyed these options to our U.S. and Israeli colleagues as well as Iranian partners. We stand ready to provide them with the necessary assistance in seeking solutions that are acceptable to all. For now, we still have an opportunity to avoid another devastating war that would have unpredictable repercussions for the entire region and world. We stand ready to seek relevant solutions and decisions at the UN Security Council to engage constructively with all parties who genuinely advocate diplomacy and dialogue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Secretary General, for your introductory remarks, and Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Rafael Grossi for your briefings. DG Grossi, we commend the IAEA team for their professionalism in implementing the agency's critical responsibilities, especially during this complex and evolving situation. Colleagues, we meet at a decisive moment in the Middle East, convening amid an intensifying conflict between Israel and Iran. It is not too late for the government of Iran to do the right thing. President Trump has been clear in recent days that Iran's leadership must completely abandon its nuclear enrichment program and all aspirations of acquiring a nuclear weapon. The Iranian government has long posed a constant menace to the peace and security of its neighbors and the entire world, which this council is charged to maintain. The Iranian government has repeatedly called for Israel's destruction and for, and I quote, death to America. They have launched direct and proxy attacks on Israeli civilians, including most recently on southern Israel's largest hospital, and just recently, in the last couple hours, on Haifa. Israel's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Iran's government has also spread chaos, terror, and suffering throughout the region. Let us not forget that the Iranian government was an enabling and ideological material force behind Hamas's deadly assault on Israel in October 2023. And it twice attacked Israel last year with hundreds of ballistic missiles. The Iranian government also encouraged its terrorist proxy, Hezbollah, to open a northern front from Lebanon and enabled Houthi rebels in Yemen to become a menace to global trade and freedom of navigation, and to launch long-range missiles endangering civilians in Israel. In January 2024, a drone attack from an Iran-backed terrorist group on a U.S. military facility in Jordan killed 3 American service members. Enough is enough. President, as the leaders from the Group of Seven stated earlier this week, Iran is the principal source of instability and terror in the Middle East. The G7 also reaffirmed the right of Israel to defend itself. While the United States was not involved in Israel's strikes, let there be no doubt that the United States continues to stand with Israel and supports its actions against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran's leaders could have avoided this conflict had they agreed to a deal that would have prevented them from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. But they refused to do so, choosing instead to delay and deny. We can no longer ignore that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. All it needs is a decision from their supreme leader. That is unacceptable, and this council must urge them to change course. The government of Iran has nothing to gain by escalating their rhetoric toward the IAEA, launching missiles at civilians, threatening neighbors, or pursuing nuclear weapons. For too long, they have prioritized terrorism and their nuclear program above the well-being of their own people. Their resulting weakness is now on full display for the entire world. The Iranian government must abandon its nuclear ambitions so that there is no more destruction. Choose instead prosperity for their people. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, we have listened with utmost attention to the Secretary General, who forcefully reminded us of the gravity of the current situation, and for this we thank him. I thank the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Madam DiCarlo, as well as the Director General of the IAEA, Mr. Rafael Grossi, for their briefings, which provide us with an assessment of and provides with an overview of the justification for today's meeting. Israeli strikes against Iran have been ongoing for a week. Civilian casualties are multiplying on both sides. Yesterday, one of the largest Israeli hospitals was struck by an Iranian missile. Israeli strikes have also targeted civilian infrastructure that is unrelated to the Iranian nuclear and ballistic program, and information that has been relayed by the Director General of the IAEA vis-a-vis the radiological situation of certain sites is on everybody's minds. There is a need to urgently end these military operations. They harbor grave threats to regional peace and security. France calls for restraint and de-escalation. Civilian lives need to be shielded, and there's a need to re-embark upon the path of diplomacy. Mr. Secretary General stressed that at the heart of this matter lies the nuclear matter. France's position is clear. Iran cannot and must not develop or gain a nuclear weapon. Iran's gaining access to this weapon would generate a threat, first and foremost, for the security of Israel and the entire region, which Iran has been destabilizing for years by delivering its support to armed and terrorist groups. A nuclear Iran would also pose a direct threat to France's and Europe's security interests. This threat is now highly tangible. Hostages of the French state are presently being held in Iran, and Iran has been delivering ballistic missiles and Iranian drones to Russia, and they are being used in its war of aggression against Ukraine. France takes this opportunity to reiterate our call for the immediate release of the two hostages who have been held in Iran over 3 years under unacceptable conditions. Iran gaining access to a nuclear weapon would represent an egregious violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This would result in a grave weakening of the international non-proliferation regime, of which the treaty is the cornerstone, and this would prompt other states to engage in an arms race in the region and beyond. And yet Iran has opted to engage in a dangerous escalation of its nuclear program, despite calls for it to respect its international commitments. Iran has accumulated a uranium stockpile that largely exceeds the limitations set under the 2015 agreement. It has generated highly enriched uranium at levels which have no justification, no credible civilian justification, and has established thousands of advanced centrifuges going beyond the limitations set out under the 2015 agreement, including sites where such activities are prohibited under the Iranian nuclear agreement and the JCPOA. The Director General of the IAEA, in a report published late May, stated that he is not in a position to guarantee the presence of the peaceful nature of the Iranian program. The Board of Governors of the IAEA observed in a resolution adopted on 12 June that Iran was failing to comply with obligations under the NPT. We are grateful to the IAEA for its unstinting efforts shouldering its oversight and inspection activities despite Iran's obstruction. We respect the ethic of impartiality, independence, and rigorous respect for treaties and their mandate, which the IAEA once again has demonstrated. The goal of the Council needs to be for Iran to resume cooperation with the IAEA, to revert back to compliance with international obligations. A decision by Iran to withdraw from the NPT would be an unprecedented escalation. However, our responsibility vis-à-vis the suffering civilian populations, our commitment to international law, and the memory of the recent crisis in the Middle East requires to act. There can be no military solution to the Iranian nuclear matter. It is through negotiations that a lasting response needs to be sought to the threat of proliferation posed by Iran's nuclear program. This is France's steadfast position alongside our British and German partners. This is the approach which resulted in the adoption of the 2015 Vienna Agreement, whose implementation we have always supported despite the U.S.'s withdrawal in 2018 and despite the cessation of compliance by Iran in 2019. The Europeans of the E3 reverted in 2020 to the dispute settlement mechanism stipulated under the agreement and undertook tireless diplomatic efforts to that end. In 2021, 2022, Iran was proposed a revised agreement that would facilitate the return of the U.S. to the agreement, and Iran would see its full implementation. Iran did not take these opportunities. This year, France, alongside E3 partners, has continuously liaised with Iran, and we hope that these exchanges will bear fruit. In the absence of agreement that reflects our security interests, France, alongside European partners of the E3, as was announced, will shoulder responsibility through the provisions set out under Resolution 2231 of the Security Council. France solemnly calls upon Iran to finally take the opportunity of a negotiated diplomatic solution. there is still time. Today in Geneva, a meeting of the E3 ministers, of the High Representative of the EU and the Iranian counterpart is being held to that end. As time is ticking, France, together with close European partners, stands ready to immediately initiate diplomatic negotiations with Iran to ensure that Iran will never gain access to the nuclear weapon. And to end this conflict, there's a need to reach agreement on a robust, verifiable, sustained agreement, which is critical to ensure the purely peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. Clear and concrete and tangible commitments need to be shouldered now by Iran to demonstrate to the international community that Tehran hopes to engage upon this path and for rapid results to be achieved. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I start by thanking the Secretary-General, Under Secretary-General De Carlo, and Director-General Grossi for your clear and sober briefings. The UK reiterates its full support for the vital work of the IAEA. We thank the IAEA Director-General and his staff for their continued professionalism, diligence, and courage in these complex circumstances. President, first, the United Kingdom is deeply concerned by the sharp escalation we've witnessed between Israel and Iran over the past week. This is a dangerous moment for the entire region, and further escalation is in no one's interest. Civilians must never be targeted, and we deplore the loss of civilian life and offer our condolences. All parties must protect civilians and civilian infrastructure in line with international humanitarian law. Restraint is vital to protect further regional escalation and loss of life. The United Kingdom supports Israel's need to protect its security and people. However, a return to diplomacy is urgent, and we have pressed this with both Israel and Iran. I also want to be clear that the UK did not participate and is not participating in Israel's strikes. We have deployed assets, including jets, to the region as a defensive and precautionary measure only. President, second, Iran's nuclear program is a significant concern. My Prime Minister has been clear, Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. The IAEA's reports show that Iran's high-enriched uranium stockpile has grown to alarming levels. Iran's stockpile of 60% high-enriched uranium has no credible civilian justification. It is essential that Iran cooperate with the IAEA and bridge the trust gap that the Secretary-General spoke of. The IAEA and the Non-Proliferation Treaty are key pillars of international security. For many years, the UK, alongside our E3 partners, has sought a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program. This commitment stands and has never been more urgent. Alongside E3 colleagues and the EU, we are engaging with Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi in Geneva today and using this window of opportunity to support a return to diplomacy and a peaceful resolution. Any further escalation, such as restricting IAEA access, diverting nuclear material, or increasing the production of high-enriched uranium, would intensify the threat to international peace and security posed by Iran's nuclear program. Third, military action cannot put an end to Iran's nuclear capabilities. We have strongly supported and continue to support diplomatic efforts to come to a deal. That is the only way to resolve the nuclear issue for the long term. President, Our objective remains stability in the Middle East. A diplomatic solution is in the interests of all concerned. Even now, it is not out of reach. Now is the time for restraint, calm, and a return to diplomacy and dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement.